Welcome to Covenant Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder, and today we are joined by Toni Carey. Toni is our Director of Covenant Women here at the church, and she is going to come with a full force of decades of wisdom in ministry and life. I asked her some time ago a question. She started unloading wisdom on me, and I said, Toni, would you be willing to share some of this in a conversation for the podcast? And she said yes. And so what I kind of said is, what do you wish that the things you know now, what do you wish you knew 30 years ago? You could have applied it back then. And so Toni is bringing the heat today. I cannot wait for you to hear the three things she has, and we take tangents on all three. So it ends up being like 33 bits of wisdom for you to apply to your everyday life. I cannot wait for you to hear it. So without further ado, let's get into today's conversation. Welcome to Covenant Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder, and I'm joined today by Toni Carey. Toni is our Director of Covenant Women here at the church. And more than that, I would like to think, she'll tell me if it's not true, I'd like to think she's my friend. And so we brought her in today because she has something for us. But let Toni tell you about herself, because she's more than my friend and she's more than our Director of Covenant Women. Toni, tell us all about you.
Well, hi, friend. There's so much to know about me, right? I've lived a long life now, it seems like. Well, I'm married to Dwayne. He's an elder here, and we've been married almost 45 years. We've got 3 kids. We've got 1 grandchild, and he's 2 years old almost. We're going to go see him in Laredo pretty soon, so I'm excited about that. What's probably important to the conversation is that I was raised in Central Ohio, and in my family, church was not a tradition. We were unchurched people. And so that matters, because what Kyle asked me to speak about were 3 things I wish I had known previously. And so those things, they're connected to the Lord. And so that's important.
Yeah. So interestingly, how we got to that as a conversation topic is, I think we were having just a normal, regular conversation about something else entirely. And maybe offhand, I don't remember it exactly. And if I did remember it, I'd probably make it fuzzy so I couldn't remember it. And then I can tell the story the way I want, which is a preacher trick. But you said something like, oh, if I'd only known that back then. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. And it got me thinking that there is one of the things I love about you is you're just this repository of wisdom. And you just sort of, you delicately sort of dole it out when it's appropriate. And I thought, I wish I could get just the full torrent of Toni wisdom. And like you said, you've got a couple decades under your belt. And
I do.
So the real question will be today, it really is, what would you love to tell younger you? And so that could be, and I don't know who's listening to this and what your age is as you listen, but this is, if we could go back to whether it's 15-year-old Toni or 35-year-old Toni or 55-year-old Toni, what are the things that you know now that would just be such an incredible blessing to know way back when? And so I'm excited to hear what you've got. This is kind of rare. I usually have some sense of what's going to get said, and this is a total surprise party. So Toni, will you walk in the front door? The surprise party is here, and will you give us the first bit of wisdom that you wish you would have had years ago?
Yes, I will. But first, I will pray, Lord, please keep me on track.
Yeah.
You know that there's a lot there, and you know that sometimes I can go off the rails. So, Father, I just pray for your wisdom and your peace as we talk about these things. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen. So I think the first thing that really came to mind for me was how much the media really, I would say, shaped my worldview. And at the time, of course, I didn't realize it. I wasn't a believer. I wasn't raised in the church. So I didn't have the solid foundation of what I like to think of as Christian education. So I didn't have any of that. And I never realized that as I was marinating in the world, that the world was really trying hard to form me and shape me. And it worked. So I was born in 1959. Summer of Love was 1969, right? So I grew up in the 70s. And when I look back now, it's amazing to me like how powerful those voices were. I know today social media is the thing, but that was kind of the beginning, I think, maybe in a strong way of the media really, really trying to encourage us to conform.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of that, look, after I put my trust in Christ, after God broke in, it was then I was looking at it and saying, are these my ideas? Where did I get these ideas? Right. So it became about unentangling and learning what is good. What does God have for us? And what have I missed?
Is there an example from let's say from the 70s, and it can be a big serious one or just a funny one, but do you have an example of what are some of those voices that somebody else who grew up around the time you grew up, who were the voices that you're going, whether I knew it or not, I was being discipled by this public figure or by this media enterprise? What were some of those things that were swirling about in that time for people that may have been born after that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say there was a specific like celebrity or anything necessarily, but it was more um, like what's in my mind are magazines at the
Mm-hmm.
grocery store, our newspapers. That was a really big part of our day. Every morning, every evening, we got a newspaper. And of course, television. There were just three channels and PBS or whatever. But still, those voices were very powerful because they were upending all of the mores of the past 2,000 years. And so when I think back, like Women's Lib was a really big thing. And what I connect with that is at that time, I was like 11 years old in 1970. But I remember thinking, you know what? When I get older, I want a house that doesn't even have a kitchen. Like, what do we have kitchens for? Right now, today, I can see that through a different lens. First of all, I enjoy cooking. But secondly, we just know that so much of God's giftedness is through serving. And lots of times that involves a kitchen. Right. So that was kind of a silly one. But when I think back to like the really serious things, one of them has to do with human sexuality and what the media was trying to teach us about that. And so I kind of feel silly saying this, but I'll say it. When I think back to where my mind was in the 70s, I didn't understand human sexuality like at all. And I would say that a 10-year-old child today knows more about sexual behaviors than I did as a young adult, even
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's there, right? They might not even be looking for it, and it's there, it's modeled.
Right. And even to your point, the interesting thing will be the knowledge of it is not the same as wisdom in it. And so even
Yes.
though our children are being inundated with everything about everything, and they have access to everything in a way that, you had Walter Cronkite and Gloria Steinem and very, you had the
Yeah.
big voices,
Hmm.
but you didn't have outside the Dewey Decimal System and a lot of hard work, you didn't have a way to get everything about everything. Whereas a 12-year-old with a smartphone today can literally get anything they want pulled up. But to your point, you would, I guess, say you were being discipled unwittingly,
Yes.
and our
Yes.
kids the same. If we're not careful,
Hmm.
we might be allowing ourselves. I think first and foremost, that's my first responsibility. But then, kids, grandkids down the way, we might be allowing or even encouraging discipleship by someone else. So if your kid watches 6 hours of Bluey a day because it's easier than parenting, and I don't know that anyone's doing that, so I'm not calling you out if you are, but Bluey is it's not evil, but it is also probably not the prime discipler you would engage for your children. So is it a little bit of that as you look at the current generation, and even as you have a grandchild, is that kind of how you're thinking about what is that going to look like?
Yes. And Bluey is a thing. Like we know who Bluey is now. So yeah. Yeah, I think so, but I think it's even more I think it's so much darker than that even.
Yeah.
Um Although that's an introduction sort of to the darkness, right? But yeah, the info wasn't available, and I thank God for that. Like I praise God for that, because the question is, what are we being formed into and by whom? Those are the questions. We think we're not, but we are. So like I remember for the sexuality piece, and then we can move on to something else. But I remember that one of the major teachings in, I would have to say mostly magazines, okay? One of the major teachings was that there are three destructive things in the world: sex, drugs, and alcohol. And you know what? Your kids might as well be choosing sex,
Hmm.
right? And so then it became about, so if you're going to encourage your child to choose sex, um, better get that daughter on the pill, right?
Mm.
And I'm not saying that's what my parents did, but I'm just saying that that was the general message of the culture was, just make sure that you give them protection,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, but that's a very different message than what God teaches, right?
Yeah.
It's very different, which is that, sexuality is a gift,
Mm-hmm.
but it's given in the context of marriage between a man and a woman, right? And
Yeah.
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
So,
So if your media diet, let's say, and my childhood feels, pre-internet, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it's like, what are the magazines at the checkout line? What's in the newspaper on Sunday morning or every other day of the week? And then ultimately, there are a couple television influences, but those are really the voices. If that was your media diet, and so you do know now that you're being discipled
mm-hmm.
by the culture, attempting to be discipled by the culture, can I just say, as a kind of offshoot, what does your media diet look like now that you have the wisdom knowing that the world is not out to disciple you in the ways of the Lord? What do you have a different media diet as you think about your everyday?
I try to. It has been it's been a challenge to figure out. I don't think I consume social media in the same way that younger people do,
Sure.
but I still have. It's part of the world. I have consumed it. Um, but I think that I can turn it around, or at least I like to think this, and think about how it's not serving me. It's not discipling, it's trying to disciple me toward darkness, but I can be smart enough to go toward the light.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds kind of, I don't know. It sounds like I know what I'm doing and I don't always, but it's just it's an experiment. Um, it seems to me that when things get introduced into the world, that it takes about a generation for the person who cares to figure out how to not let it control you. Okay.
Okay.
Credit cards were like this. My parents' generation, they didn't have any credit cards. They also didn't have much of anything. By the time Dwayne and I were married, credit cards were really being marketed to people. And what happened? Lots and lots of people got in big trouble with credit cards to the extent that we needed to be taught how to manage these things, right? So it's sort of the same thing. And I think social media is like that. I don't know. Do you think it's still pretty hard to navigate?
Um, it's what's so funny is and so I'm not saying I say this. I'm not saying this about you, but when you said I think I kind of have a pretty good grip on it,
Yes,
I don't know anybody that doesn't say they have a good grip on it until it has a grip on them, and it's so subtle and insidious in the way that
it is.
that it, for the most part, I think there are probably people, and I can acknowledge there are probably people who have it and have cultivated the algorithm in such a way that it is a pure edifying stream of godliness. I'm sure someone has figured this out.
Wow, really?
Um, I would like to meet that person. I don't think I've ever met them. Most people I know limit themselves the same way you would eat candy or something else. You go, this is not good for me, but
Oh,
it's
yeah,
pleasurable. And I think
right.
those are the people who are most realistic who go, it's not good for me, but it's pleasurable. And it's pleasurable in moderation. And so I have a 15-minute limit and then I'm done. In my house, we laugh. My wife has Instagram and Facebook, and I have the password to give her more time, which was not my idea. She came to me one day. She goes, I'm going to have 15 minutes a day and you get the password. And that way I can't free myself up to look at more, but I do like a little bit in a day because I do keep up with this or look at that. And I go, well, whatever. But it was her self-governing practice to go, I'm taking control out of my own hands and giving it to someone else. And I never don't give her the extra time if she wants it, needs it. It's partly for her job and all that. But
Yeah.
it's a good check. She creates a check for herself that, well, she has to kind of shamefully hat in hand go, can I have 15 more minutes on my social media, Dad? And you go, well, yeah, that's funny. But I do think the thing maybe I would communicate to our people is like the absence, even if most people go, well, it's really nothing. So like if it's not pure darkness, it's just nothing. I mean, in that sense, like football in the fall on Saturday and Sunday is,
Mhm.
it's not darkness. Some of the
Right.
ads might be leading you to some darkness. Some of the cheerleader shots might not be the best thing for the average man to look at, but it's kind of just neutral. It's nothing. But too much nothing is not the same thing as something that's good for you. And so it's like celery. You can eat celery all day. That's not going to sustain you.
Yes.
Um, and so that would be how I think of it for our people. It's like, I've never met someone who said, I'm edified by it, but I do meet people who can find moderating or healthy approaches to it.
Mhm. I like
Um,
what Steph does. That's really smart. Um, when I say that I feel like I can manage it, it's taken me a while to figure out, okay, so here's an example. Um, let's say I'm following a fashion blogger
mhm.
and they parade all these beautiful dresses. And I finally figured out that I was like, oh, yeah, those dresses are beautiful. But guess what? They don't have the dress that I have. Right. I mean,
Right.
just trying to flip. It's all games, right? It's better to just not be on it, I'm pretty sure. So,
I do recommend, I mean, when people come and they have any issue with it at all, I'm like, well, if you'd be willing to just get rid of it altogether, I think that's healthy. And yet
yeah.
there are real utilities and real things people use it for and relationally. And so not everybody's the same. And so it's not one size fit all. So to that point, yeah, I think the thing, and maybe to wrap up your first point, is you've really been helpful in the question we need to ask ourselves is not even, is this good or bad? The question is,
Right.
how am I being discipled by whatever it is I'm putting in front of me all throughout the day?
That's
Um,
right.
so if I'm only reading romance novels, or I'm only on social media, or I'm only watching Netflix, whatever it is you do,
Hmm.
um, that thing is shaping and forming your heart,
Hmm.
whether you're 15 or 75.
Yes.
And that, I think, is great wisdom, because it just is so subtle that day to day we don't recognize until it's sometimes too late in a sense. So that's really helpful. Okay.
Yeah, it's, there's just so much that there's just so, this, there's so much in the world today. And I think so much about all media is just about having us conform to a certain way. And
Yeah.
I think about the verse in Romans that, we've talked about, you've preached on, do not conform to the pattern of this
Mm.
world, but be transformed, right? And we
Yeah.
think about that because it's so that we can test and approve what God's
Yeah.
will is, his
Yeah.
good, pleasing, and perfect will. And so his perfect will is life giving. And that's what we're after. We're after life giving. The words and influences, right? I was on a walk. We've been in Florida. We've been in some other places, and so we're on a walk, and we walked past this super beautiful lawn, beautiful grass, and I, really admiring it, the deep green and everything. But shortly after we walked by, a truck pulled up with a bunch of weed killer, a bunch of poison, and this guy was spraying poison all over. And I was like, that's it. I mean, it's poison to have the appearance of perfection the way
Yeah.
the media would like us to have, right?
That's
So
really
not
good.
so not good. We don't want that. So, but the other thing, and I would say this is probably even more powerful, is the fact that I specifically remember the teaching in the culture that nobody should teach religion to their kids.
Mm.
And the whole idea was that you're brainwashing your children. You need to let them live their life. And then when they're adults, let them choose what religion, what path they want to follow. And this is, what are you doing? You're raising a world full of psychopaths,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? How is this a good idea? But I think that there were a lot of people who were sort of in that loosey goosey stage where they were like, yeah, why are we teaching them these things, right?
Mm.
So that, and that also is, anti-God, anti-Bible.
Yeah. And it's something that parents run into today, and it's a different flavor, but the same idea of allowing, you know, it's a fine line between pressing belief onto someone against their will, and shaping and forming and raising them the way they should go. And so we, in the complication of today's world and all the ideas swirling around, there is a real Holy Spirit. You better lead us, because we don't totally know how to get through this. So
That's
um
exactly right.
okay, well then,
Yeah,
okay, so let's say that's our first bit, and I feel like we could do 30 more minutes on that, but I know you prepared
absolutely.
more.
I
So
did.
what is the second thing, if you could go back and you could have today's wisdom way back when, what's the second bit of wisdom you'd reveal to yourself?
Oh my goodness. It's just God,
Hmm.
inviting God to enter in and just standing back, watching how he bursts in and how he changes everything. So I mentioned at the beginning that I was from an unchurched family. Our tradition was not church. However, God burst in. And I remember I was third grade, so like 8 years old. And at that time, we weren't so aware of some of the depravity, maybe, of humans. So what was happening is my local Nazarene church sent a school bus to my neighborhood. And my mom and dad didn't go to church, the other kids didn't, but for whatever reason, I did. So I had about a year of being bused to this church and just really having prayer and hearing about Jesus. I did not turn my life over at that time, but I like to think that the result that I'm living with today was the seed being planted then.
Are there places in today's world then, as you think about, hey, God bursting in and the idea that God should be not only in Sunday, but God should be in everything? Are there places where you kind of grieve as you look around and go, God is being sidelined, or is he's an accessory? Or how do you think that the average person who maybe hasn't totally realized that, is it possible to live as a Christian, go to church and all that, and still maybe have God on the sidelines?
Totally. Isn't that so true? Yes, it is. And I think about it, and the way it ties into the other things I was talking about is just teaching what is good to our children and really taking that seriously. You know, I tell people, I talk to people about what the experience has been like to raise sons and daughters. And I've told people, you know what, especially moms, you might not realize it, but your sons are basically done listening to you at about 13.
Yeah.
They love you. And I don't know, Kyle, you're a guy. Maybe that is your experience too. They still love you. They still feel tenderly toward you, but they are so done listening to you. And so when women are really thinking about, what do I want to do here with this son of mine? Do I want to continue in this marriage? Do I want this family to stay together? I just think that's something to really consider. So I think it's that kind of thing, like really teaching, for example, forgiveness, which I think grace and mercy are beautiful. I think obviously many characteristics of God are beautiful, but teaching the forgiveness piece is a very practical teaching. And oh my goodness, the hurt in the world around unforgiveness is probably one of the most destructive things, and families don't talk about it.
It's really precious, actually. And I hadn't thought of it from that angle, but the idea that I can begin to infuse God into the rising generation, but I talk a lot about coming in the side door on things. I could either say, God says you got to forgive your sister, or I can come at it kind of like you said, with this sweetness of, let me teach you what it looks like to work through reconciliation. Let me teach. And so you can give a godly principle with a godly practice, with a godly outcome. And tying it back to God is an everyday, all day experience. And yet that's practical, everyday, daily living wisdom that will last them a lifetime. And it is absolutely God-centered.
Yes.
And yet it didn't start with sit down and open your books on forgiveness so we can do a lesson. It's what are the things that are precious to God's heart, and how do I make sure that these enter your heart with right context? I don't want to hide that it's a God thing, but that's really, I think that's most parents, I think these days, they hear what you're talking about and they think, so I'm supposed to do a thrice daily devotional with my kid, and I need to be teaching them biblical Greek. And like, if I'm not doing, because there's always somebody online, to go back to the previous point, there's always somebody online that's doing it. So we feel like we're failing. But what you're saying is it actually can be pretty simple.
Yes.
To live the way and model the way for your kids.
Yes. In fact, I was doing a devotion, and you know how the word is. It's just alive, and it means something different every time. But I was looking at the Shema, the Jewish prayer, where they were basically, where we're being taught in Deuteronomy, tell these things to your children when you're walking along the road, when you're lying down, when you're getting up, the whole thing. And I was realizing, I didn't do that. Like, did I ever say to my children, you should not murder? Now, I don't think they have. I hope they haven't. But did I straight up say the commandments directly to my child? And when I've asked other people that, they've said, oh, we've we did this devotion, we did, they were in Christian school, whatever. But it's like, but did you say God's words directly to each child frequently enough during the middle of your day, the end of your day, the beginning of your day? So I think that's a really simple, like, I think that's one of those things we overthink in the word, right? It's simple. Talk about it all the time. You don't have to have a dedicated devotion 3 times a day, but you just
Right.
talk about it, right? So those are the things that are, that I think are really important to think about and also to do. And uh, the way God has just exploded into my life in the past several years is just amazing to me. And I'm so grateful and thankful. And I look back and I can see that it was truth. It's truth.
Wow. I'm grateful God entered into your world because you, whether you know it or not, are someone that kind of enters or injects God would be the right word. You inject God into all of our worlds so effortlessly, and it just kind of flows from you. And I'm sure people watching and listening can just hear it, how I could pull a string and just watch you go with all the things God has done in you. And it's super encouraging. So that even for our, we got an older generation in the church. And if you are listening, we need the younger generation and those just coming up. We need this, exactly what Tony is doing. We need this. We need your wisdom and your passion for what God has done to kind of be on display, because we forget in the busyness, and sometimes the older generation forgets how busy the younger seasons of life are. You move into retirement and you're like, why is everybody so stressed out? And every generation forgets the one before it, and every generation resents the one after it. And it's a normal thing. And yet I'm just so glad that God has invaded your life, and it's a blessing to us. So that's 2.
Thank you. Me too.
I asked for 3. Tony, what is the final for today? Because we could do part 7 of this, and I think you'd still have
Sure.
more wisdom. What is the final lesson today on what's the wisdom you wish you'd had years ago?
It's to walk with others. Kyle, I've heard you talk about how, 7 years you had after you really turned your life over, that you had 7 years of not really having anybody to walk with you. Life is hard, and walking with each other is the thing that makes all the difference. I didn't, I believed God. I believed that there was a way to live in a godly manner, but I didn't have anybody to show me, and I didn't have the background from, I didn't have Sunday school like some folks do, to fall back on. So it's walk with others.
Okay. Practically speaking, because I love it, and you're right. I did 7 years in the wilderness that I just didn't know any better, and I didn't have anybody to walk it out with me. And so I had a few people throw inner tubes along the way that kept me from drowning entirely. But yeah, that's a big deal. How do I do that practically? So we just said it's a busy life. There's a lot of distractions. There's so much to do. Can you go back to yourself at, early to mid 30s? You got 3 kids. You got this life. What was that like for you in that era of making friends, keeping friends? Your husband's busy, he's traveling. What would that look like today if you can port yourself from then back to, like, how does that work? How do we make these relationships, and do I need to seek it out? Will it come find me and I need to be patient? What does it look like?
If I could go back, I would make it the number one priority, after the Lord in my life. It makes everything better. It makes everything different. You get to walk with God, partner with Him. I do think it's kind of hard if it's not that level of commitment, because you can always say, let's just go have a cup of coffee, and maybe that'll work. But people are really busy, and so that's hard. But we've set up groups here at Covenant. That's one way. We're trying to really make sure everybody knows everybody is invited. And one of the things I say, I think that is maybe an obstacle to women, is this idea that they must be at every sporting event for their kids and grandkids. That is a beautiful thing, to be present. We want our kids and grandkids to know that we are there for them, but we also want them to know that our faith is first. Our faith in God is first. So if we have to skip those things once in a while, that I hope that we would be willing to do that. Go for it.
Oh boy. Okay.
I know.
I wish you hadn't said it, but now I have to say. So this is not back in my day, but okay. I think back to my own. I was a high school basketball player, varsity high school basketball, and I had a friend and we would count the number of people in the stands, and we weren't very good as a team. And often we would look at our side of the arena that we played in, and I'd go, "Well, I think I counted 41." He goes, "No, you're over. It's 39." And there'd be 39 people at the whole thing, and my parents weren't there, and his parents weren't there as a 4 o'clock Tuesday afternoon game or whatever, and we didn't care. And I think what we are unwittingly doing, and this is not bound in fact, this is bound in my feeling and observation as I walk with our people. I think we are unwittingly creating a generation of approval junkies in the
Oh,
way that we are at everything with encouraging words or flowers or whatever. We're at everything. We are over investing in some places in our child's athletic prowess or whatever. And the ultimate end game is one day they're going to be 19 or 29 or however old they end up being, and they're not going to be involved in t-ball or dance or piano or whatever. And they're going to look up and there's not going to be anybody there to cheer. And because we've told them we're there at all things for all times to be all encouraging, I think we're creating an approval junkie that is going to be profoundly lonely and let down and discouraged in the season to come, because we all have seen the quarter life crisis that the generation's going through now, where they're like, I'm really lonely and where is everybody? And that's my fear for this. And it doesn't mean stop going to all your kids' stuff, but it does
no.
mean moderating and understanding that we are shaping their expectations for what
Yes.
relationship looks like. And if a relationship is really sort of child worship in the way
Yes.
we approach it, it's a really hard thing for a little God like that, who is at 15 on the football team as a God amongst men, to be 25 and not have anyone worship them anymore. And it creates a strange idolatry. And so that's not aimed at anyone. It's sort of just this thing I've been watching going, I'm afraid we're creating this. And a generation from now, we're going to look up and go, ooh, I think we overdid it.
Yes. And we have to be careful with that too. I like what you're saying, but also just creating idols of our kids,
Yeah.
right? And
That's what
so,
leads to it, right? So
yes.
because we create idols of our kids and vicariously living through them or otherwise trying to get glory from them, because social media allows us to now, if I show them off, it looks good on me.
Mhm.
That is the genesis of then our idol worship of them, even though it doesn't feel like that. It feels like loving parenting.
Yes.
Creates an approval junkie in them
Yes.
that when that circle comes back around, neither of us satisfies the other ultimately.
Absolutely. And it's just more simple and beautiful to worship God and to be in relation, to have him be in that place, right?
Yeah. No, it's easy for me to say. I always laugh. I'm a girl dad and I don't have kids that play sports on Sundays. And it's always easy for me to say, but I know so many families are stolen away for sporting things on Sundays. And it's a hard thing to put your foot down and go, we don't do stuff until noon on Sunday because we're a family that values, because I'm not a stickler on church attendance and that church is the thing. It's life in the church. It's faith and walking with Jesus. And yet we all know that those habitual, regular practices are what shape our lives, are what keep us in that community. And so I do start fearing when I stop seeing a family and they go, well, we have this sport on Sundays now. And I go, oh, well, I hope we see you after the season. But it's just like during COVID, people said, I got really used to being at home on Sundays. And a lot of people never came back because it was more fun to watch Netflix and have brunch than it was to, put your makeup on and put a dress on and get to church. And that's just
right.
real. So that's hard.
The sacrifice, but it's a great thing for the kids to remember about you. That's what they'll remember, that she loved Jesus.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a daughter that is, we're recording this ahead of Easter, but I have a daughter that's going to be dancing on a Sunday. And we didn't know when we signed up for this thing. We thought it was a Saturday. It turns out she got bumped and she's on Sunday. And it's out of town and I'm driving home on Saturday and I'm going to come home and preach and go to church. And my oldest daughter's coming with me. And so we're abandoning her. And,
oh boy.
And we said, hey, FYI, we love you. We know, we're proud of you and I'm sure you'll be great. And you don't need us there. So we'll see you. And she looked at it for a minute and she went, yeah, I guess I'll be fine. Okay, see ya. And she was thrilled that it's clear for her now, we're not going to be there and it'll be fine. Um, and yet there is this tension in us because of what the world is attempting to kind of lead us into that goes, but are you a bad father? Are you a bad mother? Shouldn't you? And ultimately, this is a conversation Carissa and I have had only in brief, and maybe it's something we should have more deeply, but the idea of creating resilience in our kids and creating grit in our kids.
Grit. I love
we
that
unwittingly, we unwittingly undo all of that in this zone when we're not careful to put the Lord first in those things, as we've eliminated their ability to be resilient for Christ, which is ultimately, if we follow the scripture, that's where we're going to have to be resilient in the days to come.
Absolutely. Amen. So good.
Tony, what you were saying, it reminded me, I'm going to look back. People watch a video are wondering what I'm looking at. I was talking to a young woman, and I asked her, and you'll see where this lines up. I asked her what her 5 biggest struggles were. She was kind of like, I just am struggling with this stuff. And I said, well, write it down. What are the things you feel like you need? And no particular order, just write them all down. And one of the things was, 3 of the 5 things were relationship based. And she goes, I just feel like these are missing from my life. And I said, how many hours, intentional hours a week are you putting into cultivating those things? Which she said, well, what do you mean? I'm very busy. I do this, that, and the other. That's why I don't have that stuff. I was like, well, then you don't want it. If you want the depth of relationship or these friendships or this family relationship or whatever it is you're looking for, if you want that, and maybe this is my way of saying the check for us as we listen to this and watch this, the check is, if there's something you feel like is missing in your life that you want, it's a faith thing, it's a community group, it's a better relationship with your spouse, whatever that is. What Tony's been saying is really interesting to me, is from the beginning to the end, the whole thing is kind of like, where is your priority? What are you allowing to disciple you? And if you're spending, let's just take social, if you're spending 5 hours a week on social media, which is less than average for Americans, 5 hours a week on social media, but you really miss having good friendships. And you spend 0 hours a week on cultivating friendships, inviting a girlfriend out to dinner, going out with the boys to watch the game, whatever, or Bible study or better things. We shouldn't be surprised by the result. And so I really think there's a inventory we can do if we think about it to how do we reorient our lives? So you've given us this great wisdom. How do I reorient my life in line with that wisdom? How do I make that change? And I want to say it's as simple as doing a little time inventory and going, I'm spending a lot of time on X. And if I say I want Y, I guess I should shift the time over to that. And if I don't, then maybe I don't really want that. I just want to want it. Do you think there's truth in that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay. Because it's sacrifice, right? And self-discipline, which is part of the fruit of the Spirit. And those things we have to train those muscles. Right.
Is there something in your wisdom, so you're retired. I mean, we brought you back and we're making you work a couple hours a week because we're desperate to have you. So we begged you, but in your semi-retirement, but you and Dwayne generally living the retired life, is there something with unlimited time, which is obviously not really true, but people would have, okay, you have a lot of time, you can choose what you want. What have you had to cut? Maybe as something in your life that you go, I just don't do a lot of this anymore. Maybe in my younger life, I would have done this. Is there something you've had to cut? Because what I've been told is as time grows shorter on the far end, we get more intentional about what we spend our time on.
Yeah. When you ask me that question, I think about something I recently read that doesn't have to do with my past. Okay. It has to do more with the future, because as we do these women's groups and as I'm, visiting with women more and more, I'm seeing how grief impacts older women. And I'm seeing how women who made their husband their lives, and then their husband is, has passed on, that those are the people who the grief many times is more devastating even than anyone else.
Right.
And so that's what I think about. I think about that, I guess what we were talking about with kids sports too, is to make time for Jesus. Like, that is the sacrifice. That's what I have to do for my future, for my present. And of course, I wish I had done it for my past.
So Yeah. So you're saying
Okay.
for a 37 or 42-year-old woman right now, or a man, we can flip the genders really easily. But let's say for
Hmm.
the spouse,
Hmm.
um, it might be wise in this season of your life to prioritize Jesus,
Hmm.
um, even at the quote neglect of your spouse for an hour or two here and there,
Yes.
knowing that one, it makes you a better spouse in the long run. So your spouse will end up loving that. The more
Hmm.
Christ-like you are, I'm sure a serving sacrificial spouse is not a bad thing. But also it prepares you for the season to come, where once you realize the only thing that really lasts and matters is Jesus,
Yes.
that's what I've got. I've put the hours in that I now have that intimacy. And as grief and tragedy and loss begin to mount,
Hmm.
I'm not lost with the loss because I early on said, I love you, but I need to love Jesus first, and I'm going to go prioritize him. Is that a good
That
summary?
that is exactly it. And I haven't been great with that.
Mm,
That's a journey for me to figure out how to do that.
yeah.
But yes, I think that is so important. Hmm.
And I mean, maybe I even created a false dichotomy. It is possible that when we're with our spouse, we could even choose to focus on Jesus in that time
Yes.
together, right? That a good marriage
Hmm.
counselor would have said, hey, dummy, they could do that together. That doesn't have to be separate pursuits. So you can either watch a dumb movie on Netflix that you don't actually want to watch, but you got to watch something, or
Right.
another Dateline. Guess what? The husband did it. Or um, it doesn't have to be an in-depth, inductive Bible study on Romans. It can just be what can we do to pursue Jesus together in this time?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes.
I like that.
Good stuff.
Tony, this has been fantastic. I have talked to you all day before. I could talk to you all day right now. But let me go ahead and close us out here. Let me ask
Okay.
you this. As we wrap up, is there anything summarizing? Do you have a summarizing statement? Do you have something you wish you would have said? Do you have one last shred of wisdom that you go, you know what? I kind of meant to get this in there, but I feel like I just want the people to hear it. Is there any last word or closing thought you want to give us?
Stay close to Christ.
How are you
That's
going to
it.
improve on that? Look at this. Okay.
Right?
Stay close to Christ. Tony, thank you for making time for us. Guys, you can reach her, Toni, Toni, at
Mhm.
bgcovenant.org. Women, if you are listening and you say, I want more of this, Toni sets aside a big part of her time to just meet with you. And so if you want to
Mhm.
go grab a coffee at lunch, come to the office and hang out, tell your story, learn more about how to gain some of this wisdom early and apply it now, Toni's here for you. More than that, if you're looking for a group, that
Mhm.
Christ-seeking relationship base that we all need, Toni's got you there too. So Toni at bgcovenant.org. She's got you. Toni, thank you for being here. Everybody else, thank you for your participation in this. This is the last episode for this season. And what that means, if you're getting this live or as soon as it comes out, it's going to be a bit. And after the summer, we'll be out with a whole new slate of things. We have a big list going of all the things we want to talk about next. But for now, thank you for being part of this Covenant Conversation. We will talk to you soon.